Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. Welcome to season two. I'm Andre, your host, and I'm thrilled today to have someone that is an expert in the industry. Today with me, Ian Payne. Joining us, Ian. Before we go any further, how are you doing? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on. I'm a big fan of the podcast, been enjoying the previous episode, so it's really nice to be here this morning. About myself, currently based in Spain, enjoying a very hot and sunny summer close to Malaga. A little too hot some days, but I can't complain when I can just jump in the swimming pool about 30 seconds away from my front door, so all good. Then, in terms of myself, I've been in the contact center industry for wow, 26 years, I think now, when very much background in workforce management, also some time working within vendor management, service delivery management. So I've had an interesting journey which has taken me from my home of Liverpool in the UK onwards to living in a number of different countries. So currently in Spain, as I mentioned, but spent some time also living in Czech Republic, in the Netherlands, and also Brazil.
Ian, you have been in the industry for a long time. You held multiple different roles within the WFM industry. What can you share about some of the most significant challenges that you have faced and how eventually you overcome them over the course of these last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's been quite a few. I think one of the big ones, which probably faced by many WFM professionals, is people's understanding in the business as to what is workforce management, why does it matter, how does it impact upon them, and questioning what it's about. And I think with it, in some roles, I remember where people like, why is your forecasting not as accurate as we would expect it to be? Because they don't necessarily understand all of the different factors that come into, what makes up a capacity plan, a forecast, and then into the reality of on the day. So I think part of it is really trying to help people understand and educate them as to what do you do, why you do it, what are the data sources that you use, what are the variables that come into account when you're looking at it, and what can go wrong. Because as great as your data can be, as predictable as your business may be, still things happen on the day that you couldn't have envisaged. So I think that's a key one, as to helping people who don't necessarily have a knowledge of workforce management understand what it's about and why it plays a part, and what you do and how it impacts an operational role, for example, how it impacts an agent. And some specific examples of interesting challenges. I think that's more of a wider general one, but COVID, obviously, working in the travel industry for the last 8 years or so, COVID was such an unbelievable impact. So as much to deflect volume to, checking the app, checking the website, as opposed to calling through to somebody, to reduce a bit of that pressure down on the agents themselves, and give as much self-service to the travelers, the customers as well. So it was a very unique one. I think all of us in WFM have come across, weather impacts, whether it's a company going out of business, a lot of different things that can happen that cause a surge in volume for a period. A very interesting use case, I imagine, for many industries, travel being a big one, obviously, because it was such an impact, but one to look at when you're looking at your disaster recovery and business continuity planning, as to if something like this happens again, what are the things that you can learn from it? And there were many.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a very important point, that working on business continuity plans, and this is the best stress test you can have, is just having that emergency in hand. How dealing with that from a WFM perspective? How stressful? How was the feeling from your team at the time?
I think with it, it was an interesting one in that the stress was felt everywhere. So when you get a situation such as this, if it was just, say, extreme weather that's driving a big increase in cancellation of flights and stuff like that, as a WFM person, I think you feel a lot of pressure because you need to try and predict okay, what's the impact going to be? What are the increasing contacts? How do we deal with this? But other areas in the business don't feel it so much. You know, your sales teams, your customer success teams, maybe. With COVID, I think everybody felt it, and there was such a unity, I think, within our organization at the time as to we need to support each other across everywhere to get through this. So I think that was a really positive thing out of it for me, that you didn't feel alone. You know that people understood that, hey, it's very difficult to predict this, right? You're doing the best you possibly can. You're given a lot of different scenarios as to the very worst case, the third worst case, the second worst case, you know, and having that support and that communication across. And we were lucky in the company that it was a startup company, or we were in the sort of scale up phase then, but it was still fairly young. And we used to have a weekly all hands meeting. You know, we've spoke very openly about what is going on within the business at that period. Everybody knew all of the things that were affecting us. And I think having that support structure in place with the communication with the wider business, with that understanding, that for me eased the stress of it, because you know that people know you're doing your absolute very best to deliver on something successfully, and they know that it's a very difficult time. So I think that for me, that really helped ease the burden of it, because otherwise I think you could just be like head in your hands.
Yeah.
What are we going to do to get out of it? And I think with that, having that additional layer of support within the organization helped me as an individual get through that, and I think helped people on my
Hmm.
team to feel that you're not alone here. That
It's
was
that sense of unity, right? Ian, let me shift a bit from those hard times and focus more now about kind of the skill sets. What are the key factors that contribute to you how effective you are?
Yeah, I think with that, obviously data analysis is key within that area. Getting the right data, quality of data, being able to, take that and look forward with it, identifying obviously the trends that are there in your business, if there are some. In other businesses, it's more difficult when you've got a startup that grows very fast, where last year isn't necessarily a predictor of the next year. But I think a solid starting point as to, great data and being able to analyze it effectively. Then obviously your skills around being very adept at, how you use those, being very confident into how you manipulate that data into getting to an outcome. And then I think with capacity planning, communication is a big part for me as well, as to understand what's the objective of what you're looking to deliver with it. So ensuring that you have a clear understanding from the wider business as to what do you want to deliver from your customer support team. So I think how you build relationships with your customer operations team, your sales teams, your marketing teams, your finance teams, etc., so that you've got all of their input coming in. And when you produce a capacity plan, when that then leads on to your forecast, you're delivering something that hits all of these goals. So how you communicate, how you look at the data, how you interpret that and put that into a form, and how you communicate that afterwards as well with people, so they understand this is what we
Mhm.
need to take into account and how it will impact on the wider business.
So you also had experiences as a service delivery manager. You did vendor management as well. I think those two somehow are interlinked in terms of skill sets. But I wanted to hear from you, like, what advice would you give for professionals that are looking or having issues on when looking at building relationships with their vendors or suppliers, specifically in this WFM space?
Yeah, it's a very interesting role I had the opportunity to get into, and I think having a WFM background helped me in many ways, because I understood a lot of the key things that you want to deliver around the metric side of things. But with the relationship, I think it's you've got to understand the vendor, what they're about, what their culture is, how that culture hopefully, mixes well with your own. Then in terms of the documentation side of things, your master service agreement, your statements of work, do they understand it very thoroughly? Do you understand it very thoroughly? Is it clear? Is it driving the right behaviors to get the right results? Then, in terms of the relationship, how do you communicate with them? I've been lucky that I've worked on both sides of it, where I've managed vendors remotely. I've also been based on site with a vendor. And it's slightly different, obviously, when you're there day in, day out and you interact with more people. but how you structure the communication, how you ensure that they understand what you need from them and that you understand from them what they're doing to achieve that, how you check that on a regular basis, how you feed that back into your organization. Because I think as a vendor manager, your role is obviously bridging the external and the internal, and people from internally, they'll just see the results, right? Did they deliver? Did they not? And from external, they know everything that's come towards hitting that number or not hitting that number. And I think what's important in your role as a vendor manager or service delivery manager is making sure that internally you understand everything that they're doing for it. If it's going well, you're celebrating the successes. If there are challenges, you're highlighting those and explaining, what's being done in order to improve, how you're working with them, what they've done already, what the next steps are, so that you build confidence in the vendor.
If you can compare, or if you can answer with both umbrella, both ads on service delivery manager and as a WFM manager as well, what's the hardest part of that job?
I'd say service delivery manager, the hardest part is not having the control of everything that's going on. So, say if you're the operations manager internally, right? You're managing the team leaders, they're managing the agents. When you're the service delivery manager, you're managing the overall, obviously, delivery of what's being done, but you've not got that same relationship. So, you've got to build a trust with your counterparts. You've got to ensure that they understand what is needed to deliver, but then you've got to trust them to deliver that. And that can be, a little bit scary at first, I think, when you step into that sort of role, that it's like, how do I ensure the success that reflects well upon me, reflects well upon them, and delivers what my company needs, whilst not necessarily be able to have the level of control that you would do internally.
Hmm.
From workforce management side of things, I think with it, the biggest challenge always around people's belief in the quality of what you're doing. Because if they don't know WFM so well, if you're new to setting up WFM within a business, you've got people who maybe aren't from the contact center industry, they don't really understand what it's about, right? And I've encountered that in some companies where it's like, don't know what you're doing, don't know why you're doing it. All I know is that yesterday the forecast accuracy was 117% and I expected 100. So I think with that, it's about being able to educate people about the complexity of what WFM is, who maybe don't know about it, who maybe haven't even been in customer support for such a long period of time, and over time building the confidence in them as to
Yeah.
what you do, why you do it, and why it's important to the business. And in some businesses it's easier than others, right? And if you've got people who know it well, great, you've got a good starting point, but still the ongoing relationship and ensuring the confidence in what you're doing is, for me, very important.
Let me shift a bit gears here from your experience, but I wanted to focus now on the industry itself. So there is an ongoing conversation about getting the right balance between efficiency and well-being, and not only about the teams we support, but I think still within WFM. And we had a previous guest where we spoke about that concept of pursuing perfection in forecasting, because it can be very stressful for people. Do you have any comment, or how do you ensure that the strategies support both that productivity and well-being on the team members? Like, any comments, ideas, suggestions there from you?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can feel a lot of pressure with forecasting where, people want it to be as accurate as possible, right? Because the more accurate you can be, the better you plan your budgets, the better you can control your costs. So I understand from the business perspective that, yeah, we want it to be closer and closer. But it's very challenging, right? Forecasting, and dependence on your industry, there's a lot of fluctuation in what you do. Travel is a good example of it because I feel there's things that you can predict, right? You know that the summer season is going to be busier than November or March or something like that. But you don't know when you'll have a volcanic eruption in Iceland or in Indonesia that closes the airspace or causes massive delays. You don't know when an airline might go out of business. You don't know whether airports won't have enough staff to handle the baggage quickly, and it'll cause people to miss flights. You cannot predict it. You can, kind of build in a leeway with it, I think, to say, okay, weather is more likely to impact me at this time of year, but I don't know what day. I might get more, issues with this, but I don't know when. So I think you've got to be able to push back on the business to be able to say, okay, we are striving to deliver the utmost accuracy in terms of the forecast. These are all the things that we've done. We've moved to maybe using Python. We've got this new WFM tool that can take all this past years of history. We've made this investment. But at the same time, people have to understand that sometimes you're going to be out. And it's about understanding what caused us to be out. Could we have potentially predicted that or not? If we couldn't, okay, you just have to take the hit. Keep that logged in your data to say, okay, that was an anomaly. That probably won't impact next year. And be the one of you, the WFM manager, I think, to not put too much pressure on your people and to tell them, okay, it's great that you want to deliver this super, super accurate forecast. And if we can, wonderful. But understand that me as a manager, I am not expecting that you can deliver perfection. And I don't want you to stress yourself to the point where, it affects your life inside work, outside work, affects your mental health, affects your relationships for a goal you're never going to get. I remember the first, I think, WFM guys that I work with, and I was lucky. I worked with real great personalities, but very much highly skilled in the world of WFM. And people would say to me, you're forecasting, you'll never get it right. And if you get it right, you're probably lucky, and you
Yeah.
probably won't be lucky the next day. So don't focus too much on that. Focus on the things that go into it to minimize variance in the forecasting in something you can control, and accept the things in life that you never will be able to control. So when it comes to, say, real-time analysts,
Mhm.
you can look at what's going on and see, okay, I've got calls queuing. That's going to start impacting my service level. What do you do at that time? Do I start chasing agents to say, hey, Andre, you've been on this call for 11 minutes, the AHT target's 7, we need you to get on the call? I can do that, but are you actually on a call where it's a complicated situation that actually will need this amount of time to resolve an issue for a customer that could otherwise lead them to churn, leave a bad review? So you've got to understand that it's not just numbers. You've got to understand that the people doing the job, dealing with the customers, they're under pressure a lot of the time. They've got lots of targets they need to deliver on. They more than anybody know that I'm above my AHT. So do you want to pressurize them more? And is it productive to do so? Maybe in some occasions it is. Understanding the dynamics of what people are doing, where to put a bit of pressure on and where to actually step back.
One of the use cases I came across recently was they started to provide the ability to any advisor to take, I don't know what they call it, but like short breaks. Like if there was they were under pressure or they were
Mhm.
tired, just take a break, 5 minutes, and just like, or 2 minutes, just to breathe and do whatever you want, just to take away from that call because the customer was yelling, or something that was more complex. And what they realized is that by enabling that and enforcing that as a well-being measure, they start actually the AHT start coming down, because there was a lot of people taking time to breathe within calls and after call works, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
And just that shift in mentality, providing that tool for well-being and saying, okay, this is here, take your time to breathe, there is no rush, just take these 2 minutes, go out, open a window, or just take a glass of water, just meditate if you want, or just do some breathing exercises. That can help. And this is a perfect example of what you were just saying, which is reinforcing not on the number but actually on the actual outcome to the client is sometimes much more important.
Definitely. I think that's a great idea because, like you mentioned, the AHC will be impacted, right? Because people need to take that time. If you've just had somebody screaming and shouting at you, and it's maybe the third call this hour because of something totally beyond your control, at some point you need to just step away a little bit because nobody can work like that all the time.
Ian, you mentioned about before when you were starting that you also had some references that help you, so you had a very diverse and impressive career journey. what inspired and what was the trigger that helped made you pursue this career in this field, and how the passion for workforce management evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. What inspired me to get into it might be similar to many people who started out in customer support, dealing with customers directly, is that I'd sit there and some days it would be busier at certain times of the day than others. And I was like, why? Why has it been quiet for the last hour, but now it's very busy and I'm pressure from calls, calls, calls. And then other times I might want a holiday on a particular day to do something and it's declined. Why? It's like, I want to go there, I want to do this. So I used to start speaking with the guys in the traffic team, it was called. I remember in Barclays where I started out. And they were great because they were very straightforward. I think people where I'm from in Liverpool are generally very straightforward, generally got a good sense of humour. We'll tell you honestly about something quite quickly. Won't, you know, go around the bush to explain something. So they'd be like, too busy, too many people off, sickness is too high. So I'd be like, oh, okay. So I understood a bit better. Then one with the calls, getting busy. Ah, that's because that team finishes then and we've got a gap before the next shift starts at this time. It's like, oh, okay. So I started to kind of look more during my working day as an agent as to what are the patterns that I see happening, why
Hmm.
things go certain ways at certain times. And then when an opportunity came up to get into a real-time analyst role, I applied, fortunately was successful, and that was my sort of starting point into workforce management. And then it was great because I had a lot of people around me who dealt with the scheduling, the forecasting, the MI reporting. And, some of these people now are thought leaders in the industry and stuff like that, who I'm still in contact with now. Occasionally, I'll bump into at a conference I have, spoken with over the years, and it's great because when I started out, I was just very young, you know, didn't know necessarily what I wanted to do, but seeing these people, learning from them, gave me something for the rest of my career. I would say where I had a great starting point of working with these people, and then moving on into different roles. It was about okay, I feel confident around real time management now, how I approach it. Maybe I want to learn a little bit about scheduling. Then once I got to a point of confidence with that, maybe I want a little bit more around forecasting, about capacity planning. And I think adding all of those strings to your bow kind of thing took me to a point where, when there was a management role for the team, I applied and I had confidence in that I had a really good overall understanding of workforce management and that I could manage people and coach people and develop people. And what added to my passion, I would say, after that was in some roles, I had people on my team who no background in WFM, just like me when I started out many years ago, right? And it brought me round kind of full circle to, okay, now is my opportunity to do what these people did for me, which is encourage them, share knowledge with them, but leave them to grow in terms of, how they develop in this area, in this type of work, but being there as a kind of a mentor, as a coach to, you know, answer the questions when they have them, share the knowledge with them bit by bit, and then let them fly. So, yeah,
The
love that.
two headliners I wrote is that define you is curiosity and passion for development, and I think that's very interesting. I wanted to still on more on the personal side. I wanted to ask, or who who are your references? So, is there anyone that if you could, you would wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with, like who kind of inspired Ian to be who he is today?
Oof. It's specifically in WFM or just
In
generally?
general, in general.
I'd say one actually would be Bob Marley. And the reason why, being from Liverpool, like Liverpool is football and music are ingrained in our culture. I would say for me growing up, obviously when you go to different places around the world, people know the Beatles, they know football teams. Unfortunately, they often know Liverpool Football Club more than Everton
Yeah,
Football
Everton.
Club, and Everton is my team, right? So yeah, I go to places like, oh, Liverpool FC, and I'm like,
So we will need to speak
no.
after because he just brought one player from my team. I'm a
I saw,
supporting
yeah,
fan, so we'll speak
we just
about
beat
that
you at the
later.
weekend as well. Yeah, and I watched the game actually. Yeah, so I didn't want to mention in case you were still sad about losing to us, but now so football and music has always been part of my culture. I would say growing up, and I remember starting listening to some music of Bob Marley in my, I guess, teenage years. And I just really enjoyed the message of the music and read a book about him, a book called Catch a Fire. Can't remember the name of the author now, but it's really, really interesting story that this guy has got about Jamaica, about the political situation as he grew up, about his background. And it just sort of stuck with me. I always had an interest in the message that he offered, being from the background that he had, encouraging about people to, live together. And it's not some sort of hippie thing, but I think just that really struck with me from an early age, and how you treat people, to not discriminate against people, to be open to, different backgrounds, different cultures. And as I've gone on in my working career and moved to different countries, spent time working in other countries for more limited periods, I think it's really helped me in terms of building relationships with people, because I'm very open. And some of the best compliments I would say I've had, I remember, spending time in South Africa when we worked with an outsourcer there, and some of the guys who, traveled in for like an hour and a half from the township where they lived into the office, going out with them socially and having a great laugh with them. And these guys are like, "You're just like us." And I took it as a great compliment, because they didn't see me as some manager who come from this other country or other company, but just a guy who they could sit down and talk with. So, but going back to the influence, yeah, I ended up in Jamaica about 5 years ago, was it? I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, on a business trip. I was getting shown around by a guy who worked for Jamaica Promotions, which is like looking at inbound
Hmm.
investments into the island. And this guy was great. I had a great time with him, taking me to Montego Bay for a few days, lots of meetings, then to Kingston. And he said to me, like, is there anything you want to do while you're here? Because we were very busy with meetings. So I was like, I'd love to go to Bob Marley's house. He goes, okay, we find a bit of time in between meetings. And one day we did. We got like 15 minutes because one finished early until the next one. And we were close. He's like, right, let's go. So I went, and this house that I'd read about in this book where he lived and he created his music back in like the 70s, and he got shot at just before this big concert where he was looking to bring together the political parties. So a lot of stuff that I remembered from my youth, and just standing there, being there. And yeah, it was wonderful, kind of full circle to my teenage years to be there. So probably him, because I just think he had a very interesting life. Unfortunately, quite a short life with, how he died,
Hmm.
obviously. But his music still resonates with people today, and I think his message is one of positivity, which for me, I'd like to think that where I've been, who I've met, and people have a memory of me, a recollection of me as somebody who was very positive, very open, and very much part of them, and not just this guy from Liverpool who came to our office for a bit, but somebody who they remember fondly.
I have to say that at least the positivity side is definitely present in your speech there, for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Um, I wanted to merge two questions in one. One is about the future and looking ahead. There is loads of trends like innovations. If there were no limitations on budget, time, resources, and it's up to you to make the next big thing, what would be the one thing you wish either to fix on the WFM industry or to build for the industry in general?
Yeah, I think on this, technology wise, I would probably go in a slightly different way, in that the one thing that I would say I've seen over the years, and probably everybody has encountered, is that there's a lack of standardization within the industry in terms of how things are done, why things are done this way as opposed to that way. Getting into the nitty gritty, why some people may count this in shrinkage, some people may not. Some people may forecast using this method, some people may forecast using that. So for me, if anything I could do to have a lasting kind of impact on the industry, it would probably look at building a body that looks at training people. So when you get into workforce management, would be whether it's a WFM school or a WFM regulatory body that can give you all this stuff so you can do yourself in line with what you're learning on the job, because you learn so much on the job that you couldn't necessarily cover in, theory and classroom, whatever it may be. But some resource that you could go to and go, okay, I want to learn a bit more about forecasting with Arena. I want to learn a little bit more about, working with SQL in terms of getting reporting data. And that, if you tell me, I know how you did it, right? And I will follow that same way. And maybe I'll expand on my skills over time, but generally you're my source. So that would probably be the thing to establish a WFM university, if I could give it a name. I think a consistency and a standardization would help, particularly now when you're looking at the AI impact in workforce management, what that will do. People are going to need to get familiar with things that they didn't need to know 10, 15 years ago when, we were getting right into the industry. And if you don't know these things, it's probably going to hold you back. So that would be the one I would say.
If you allow me, very recently I announced that WFM is doing a market research worldwide. So our focus is focused on the professionals. And one of the things we really want to do is help defining, like, is there a standard? Like, can we collect enough data to refine what that standard looks like? Is everyone pursuing the same things? And I think what you said resonate a lot with myself. And it's very inspiring, I have to say, what you just said. Ian, we are just in the end, very exciting conversation. Any final words you want to leave the listeners with?
No, just to say, I think the work that we WFM are doing is fantastic. As I say, I've enjoyed many of the previous podcasts, and I think it's great that people like you, like Doug, others in the industry who are looking to share such knowledge, share the resources, and look at, like you say, where can we standardize things? Where can we identify who is the right person to go into roles? So, yeah, I really commend what we WFM is doing, and I look forward to seeing. And if there's anything I can do to join the discussion around these things, I'd love to do so
Mhm.
because, like you say, I'm very passionate about it, very positive about it. I hope that comes across. And I just one thing, I hope everybody has understood my accent. As Liverpool people have a fairly strong accent, and despite being away for 13 years, it's softened a little, but it still remains, I would say,
No, I would say at least for myself was perfect. Everything understood, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think it was a great conversation. So our research is coming out soon. You and everyone will be invited to join across our network. So stay tuned for that. Will be coming out very soon. Ian, thank you. Enjoy the weather in Spain.
I will do. Muito
Speak to you soon.
obrigado. Foi um prazer. Thanks for your time, Andre.
Obrigado. Thank you.
Bye.